You've seen the textbooks. You've seen the sanitized oil paintings in the galleries of the East. The noble warrior sitting by a flickering evening fire, patiently waiting for a choice cut of bison meat to develop a perfect, golden brown crust. It is a lie. It is a sweet, sterilized fiction created by civilized people who are too terrified of their own true predatory nature. In the 1750s, on the Great Plains, no one waited for dinner to be ready. Dinner was ready the exact second the bison's heart stopped beating. The concept of medium rare didn't exist because the concept of cooking was often a luxury that cost more than it was worth. A true warrior of the 1750s wasn't a cook. He was a survival engineer. While the white smoke from his flintlock musket still hung in the heavy, humid air of the prairie, he was already elbow-deep in a steaming harvest. He wasn't looking for flavor. He wasn't looking for a culinary experience. He was looking for caloric density and chemical survival. He didn't wait for the fire because fire is the enemy of raw biological efficiency. Heat destroys the very enzymes that make you an apex predator. Instead of roasting the meat, he consumed the raw, vital organs and took in a dark, iron-rich essence directly from the source of life. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't primitive tradition. It was biological mathematics. History is never what you think. Imagine a biological mechanism operating at the absolute limit of physical wear. A 1750s warrior is not just a man. He is a high-performance bio-object, burning 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day while tracking a herd under a scorched, iron sky. To keep this mechanism from seizing, he required fuel of extreme quality. Fuel that could be absorbed into the bloodstream almost instantly, without the massive energy expenditure required for long-term digestion. The bison's liver was not merely an organ. In the visceral reality of the 1750s, it was a biological capacitor. It held the densest concentration of glucose, vitamin A, and hemi-iron in the entire prairie. When the warrior extracted this prize in the immediate aftermath of the hunt, he wasn't looking for salt or spices. He was looking for a chemical bypass. Raw liver is a direct injection of energy. Fire denatures the enzymes and incinerates the vitamin C. For the warrior, cooking the liver was an unacceptable waste of resources, a metabolic error. He knew instinctively what we have forgotten, that raw liver is brain fuel. It is what allows the human eye to track a slight movement in the tall grass from a kilometer away. It is what keeps the nervous system firing with zero latency. Then there was the heart. Pure, incredibly dense muscle tissue, saturated with coenzymes and iron. They claimed it in the very seconds after the fall, before the heat of the beast had faded. Each piece was a capsule of caloric density. They swallowed it warm, feeling the heat of another life migrating into their own core. This was the ultimate act of biological absorption. One engine had stopped so that another could gain additional horsepower. The cynical conclusion: nature knows no mercy. It only knows the debit and credit of energy. Morality doesn't stop muscular fatigue. Ethics don't cure the tremors of iron deficiency. Raw fuel does. Those who waited for the meat to cook through usually became food for the wolves before the sun ever touched the horizon. The greatest mistake of the modern human is our civilized gag reflex. We have become addicted to the sterility of plastic packaging and the aesthetics of the plate. But in the 1750s, the internal processing chambers were the most valuable biological trophy on the field of the hunt. This wasn't waste. It was a hermetically sealed capsule of semi-digested plant matter, a ready-made cocktail of enzymes, probiotics, and B vitamins. The Plains warrior had no time to gather roots or study botany. He didn't need to. He hacked the complex, multi-chambered digestive system of the bison. By consuming the raw vessel along with its partially fermented contents, he gained access to the energy of the grasses and grains that the human body is physically incapable of processing on its own. This was chemical survival in its most primordial form. It was a visceral method of obtaining vitamin K, critical for survival in a world where a single deep scratch could lead to a slow, septic decline. To the European observer, this was savagery. To the warrior, it was a high-efficiency nutrient transfer. Why spend days gathering plants when the bison has already done the work for you and concentrated the results in a convenient, natural vessel? But the real liquid gold was the vital essence. That dark, iron-rich fluid that became available the moment the prize was opened with a stone blade. They took it in by the handful, while it still carried the heat and oxygen of life. In 1750, this essence was better than any water from a muddy creek. It was the perfect natural electrolyte solution, saturated with organic salts and proteins. It didn't just quench thirst. It restored cellular balance in minutes after a 10-hour run. You see disgusting habits. I see flawless energy management. When you are 300 miles from the nearest trading post, your survival depends entirely on how quickly you can turn another creature's life force into your own strength. Now look at the men who sought to conquer these people. The European explorers and soldiers of the 1750s were true biological ruins. Their diet, salt pork, hardtack, and stagnant water, was a perfect recipe for slow-motion collapse. They were filled with sodium, but absolutely hollow inside. Scurvy rotted their gums until their teeth fell into their soup. A total lack of vitamin B12 turned their muscles into atrophied jelly. They carried the most advanced flintlock muskets and the most precise maps, but their own bodies were in a permanent state of metabolic default. On the other side stood the plains warrior. Because of his diet of raw, unprocessed internals and vital fluids, his system was maximally saturated with oxygen. His vision was sharper than any marksman from the British or French armies, thanks to the massive surplus of vitamin A. His endurance was phenomenal because he wasn't fighting his own biology. This was a battle between a high-performance biological mechanism and a rusted machine running on industrial waste. The Europeans called them savages, specifically because they consumed the unrefined harvest of the hunt. But it was these savages who could run 40 miles through a heat wave without losing focus, while the European soldier fainted from the first sign of heat stroke or iron deficiency. This wasn't an advantage in technology. It was an advantage in biological mathematics. Raw nutrition gave the warrior the ability to recover twice as fast. Vitamin C from unrefined glands made his immune system an impenetrable fortress against the conditions that mowed down white men by the thousands. The frontier was a filter, and it favored the visceral over the refined. The cynical conclusion: technology is a ghost if your own biology is bankrupt. You can have the finest steel blade in the world, but it won't help you if your hand shakes from malnutrition, while your enemy can see your silhouette in the twilight as clearly as if it were noon. This primordial power rested on one single massive resource. The bison was not just an animal to be hunted. It was a mobile warehouse of biological weaponry that the warriors had learned to unlock. It was a closed energy loop. The prairie provided the grass. The bison concentrated the nutrients in its organs, and the warrior harvested that energy in its purest, rawest state. When the herds began to vanish, that biological advantage vanished with them. It wasn't a defeat on a battlefield. It was a collapse of the supply chain. Without the primal harvest, without the dense core of muscle, and without the warm, vital fluids. The warriors became as vulnerable as the men they fought. Their metabolism, tuned for extreme quality, simply could not function on a government ration of white flour, salt, and refined sugar. The bodies that were once high-performance machines for processing visceral energy turned into flaccid shells, poisoned by cheap carbohydrates. It was the final audit of the frontier, and the balance came up red. We have traded this visceral potency for the luxury of comfort. We take synthetic pills in plastic bottles and wonder why we feel so perpetually exhausted. We look back at history through the distorting filter of modern morality, forgetting that we are, at our core, merely biological containers for energy. Morality is a luxury we allowed ourselves only after we stopped fearing the math of hunger. But when the system fails and the supermarket shelves go empty, the mathematics will return. And it will be just as primal, visceral, and merciless as it was 300 years ago on the Great Plains. So my name is Nathaniel Blackwood, and history is never what you think.